Joining me now is Felix Cavaliere of the Rascals. He has a great new solo album out with a fantastic single called "So Love." The album's called "Then and Now." Felix, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, my pleasure, Chris. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. And I just have to mention on a personal note, my 8-year-old son's name is Felix. So
Oh, how
I've
cool,
actually
man. Yeah.
I've never interviewed a Felix before, but
Excellent.
I do talk to one very regularly. I think that I'm going to be able to keep more even tones, and I won't have to yell at you to do your homework, Felix. I think
There
we'll
you
be all
go.
right.
There you go. Who did you name him after, if I may ask?
My wife and I, we really liked the name, and it just, we didn't want to have a particularly common name. And we thought for a minute, like, oh, but are people going to think Felix the cat or, Felix from the Odd Couple? And then we thought, like, what kids are going to know those two references? And
Right.
yeah, we just really liked the name. We wanted to have something that was different, but, not everybody can get away with naming their kid, Apple or Moon Unit or
Yeah,
Dweezil.
really. That's it.
So
Well, the what do you call it? Let me just tell my manager we're good. Uh, Basically, in my case, my father's family is from a town in Italy where their Saint Felix was born.
oh, very nice.
So I am the third in a line, and it looks like the last in a line. But we they all named their sons Felix, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's right
That is
outside
very
of
cool.
Naples, Italy.
You said it was outside of Naples.
Yes.
I've traveled around Italy, but that's one
Wow.
one little spot on the map I haven't been to. A lot of like Florence, Venice, Milan, Cinque Terre. But
Oh,
I couldn't
nice,
get to it
nice.
all.
No, it's great to see. But yeah, that's how I got my name. Just thought I'd
Yeah,
let you know.
well, and his little sister's name is Lucy, and
Oh,
so a great friend of mine. If I had thought about the fact that we were going to talk about it, I'd have the picture where I could show it. A friend of mine named Gene Beretta, who is a children's illustrator. He
hmm.
drew a cartoon with Felix the cat and Lucy from Peanuts, and Lucy from Peanuts is in her little Doctor is in booth and saying to Felix the cat, I think our parents watch too much TV. So it's it's a really special thing that I was able to get there. But anyway, that's enough about my kids. But speaking about being kids, whenever I talk to musicians for the first time, I always like to start with finding out the role that maybe music played in their life just growing up. Was it always on in your house? Were your parents musical in any way? At what age do you remember music being a part of your life?
Well, when I was 5 years old, my mom uh, enrolled me in piano lessons, and they immediately saw that I had some talent or something. So they enrolled me in a very serious school, which it was 2 years. I mean, two lessons a week for 8 years. I did, and it was a really great thing for me because I really learned music. That was classical music, but I was on the road at that time to become a classical pianist. That's what it was all about. So yeah, I started that way, and no, there was no one in my family that I was aware of that was a musician per se. Most of my family was medical,
Right.
and it just happened that basically I kept continuing and continuing and continuing.
So is there a moment where you go from like classically trained pianist to you see Little Richard on TV or something like that? Is
Oh
there
yeah,
is there a moment of like wait,
oh
piano
yeah.
can be a lot more fun?
Well, I wrote a book. It's called Memoir of a Rascal, which explains the whole thing. But basically, what happened is I went from uh, what do you call elementary school to junior high, and the first day of school, this fellow who was to become one of my dearest friends, his last name was Cal, and my last name is Cav. So he sat right in front of me, and he turned around, and he said, "Hey, you like rock and roll?" I had never heard rock and roll. I was really not really allowed to hear too much outside of what I was studying. But I said yes because I wanted to be cool. And I went home that evening, and we had the good fortune growing up near New York City of having Alan Freed, who brought music called rock and roll from Cleveland to New York, WINS. Turned on the radio, heard the aforementioned people you're talking about, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Jerry Lee Lewis, playing the same instrument that I was playing, but not exactly the way I was playing it. So, yes, it really captured me, captivated me, enthralled me. And
You
that's
know,
where I really
yeah,
started.
I can definitely see how that would happen. That's sort of like, there's sort of a generational moment. A lot of times people will be like, well, I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. If they're a little younger, the first time they saw Kiss and they couldn't understand, like, what is all this, and the thing, but so for you, it was the sounds. And it's interesting because I've lived in LA for 20 years, but I grew up in the New York area.
Ah, there you
And
go.
thinking about WINS being a music station, I was of course aware of MCA and
ABC.
ABC, of course, but to me, 1010 Wins is always the news station.
Absolutely.
So thinking about the fact that they were ever a music, of course they all were music stations at some point, but I until you just said that, I just thought MCA, ABC, those were like the only game in town. But that's actually pretty interesting. And Alan Freed was on WINS.
Correct.
Oh, see, that's
Yeah. And
interesting. See, that I didn't
well,
know.
he
Yeah.
really started it. He brought it to the whole world, but he brought it to New York City from Cleveland. And it was fascinating, man, because what was really, like, for example, they would do live shows at the theaters, the movie theaters, Lowe's, RKO's, etc.
Yeah.
They would have perhaps 10 acts on those shows, maybe for $5. But those people would be like legendary. Like, you have Chuck Berry's and Bo Diddley's and Little Richards. And so, I mean, it was really fascinating because, I mean, the interesting thing is obviously the music was fresh and new, to most of us, not just people like me who were listening to classic. It was new. It was unique. It was R&B. And the other interesting thing about it is that prior to, like the computer world, there was no way to auto tune somebody's voice. There was no way to fix up people's mistakes. We can fix anything now. We can fix syllables. When somebody goes in and says the word StreamYard, you can do the ST Ream YARD. So point I was trying to make is the people who were singing and playing were unbelievably talented.
Right, of course, and you had to be, especially when you're going on a bill with some of the talent you're talking about. Now, did you get to go to any of those shows that you're talking about, where like,
As many as I could.
oh, that's
Absolutely.
fantastic! Wow, yeah, that's and yeah, I mean, and I think that's the benefit when you grow up in a big metropolitan area like New York. You get the opportunities to actually see those things, and I so that had to be great. And you said the name of your book, which I didn't realize. I should have flipped through it. I know it's a little older, but I wish I'd had a chance to look at it before I talked to you. Just sort of give sort of the broad strokes to how the Rascals come about, because
Okay.
it's such an important part of your story. And just for our audience who maybe doesn't know,
Mhm.
Rascals songs, but maybe just off the top of your head, you don't realize, but Good Lovin', Groovin', A Beautiful Morning, I've Been Lonely Too Long, People Got to Be Free, How Can I Be Sure? Those just, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So how does the Rascals come about, just from loving this music, going to see it when you can, listening to it on the radio, and, playing piano as best you can. How do the Rascals grow out of that?
Well, I mean, let me see if I can encapsulate it because it's a fairly long story, but uh, I ended up, basically getting involved in what we call rock and roll pop music in high school, and then college. I went to college to actually to be in pre med. I started a band in Syracuse University, and we took a summer job in the Catskill Mountains So if you're familiar with the Catskill Mountains, that was the place for everybody to go in the summer to take a vacation and to hear live music and to hear comedians. And it was really an excellent place to uh, work, number one, and to visit, number two. Well, every weekend they would have a main act come in. We were the house band, so to speak. It was called Felix and the Escorts. And one weekend, this group came in called Joey D and the Starlighters. They had this hit called Peppermint Twist. They came in. I met them. That was the moment to really change my life, because I met David Brigatti, who was my ex-songwriting partner and singer partner, Eddie Brigatti's brother. All right, so then the season goes and it's time to go back to school, and I get a phone call from Joey D's manager. Would you like to join the band? Their organ player quit and they're in Europe. So I said, let's see, I could go back to the freezing winter up in Syracuse. So I asked my dad what he thought, and he said, "Wow, man, give it a shot. Give it a shot." I said, "Okay." I flew over, and the shows that we did, the first one was in Frankfurt, Germany.
Wow.
And it's an interesting phenomenon that the band that was opening up for the Joey D and the Starlighters was called the Beatles. Wow. So I immediately saw a phenomenon that was about to happen very shortly in the United States, but it had not quite gotten there yet. And I saw these, screaming horde of people. Well, it was very difficult to even hear yourself, never mind the music. And these fellas up there with long hair. And I said, "Wow, this looks like fun. Maybe I should do this." And that's a true story. I mean, like I said, wow, I think I could do this, And little did I know they were some of the best songwriters that ever lived, but we didn't know that at the time.
No, and look, if you had decided that you're going to go back to freezing cold Syracuse and become a doctor, you'd still have this great moment where you're like, "Oh yeah, I saw the Beatles like way before they were the Beatles," like right before they broke big, and that's cool enough right there. But obviously, when you see that happening, you're like, "Yeah, I can't imagine." It's funny you mentioned that, because literally yesterday, I was being interviewed by somebody, and I was talking about, I went to school for communications, radio, TV, film. I love music, but I don't have a musical bone in my body. I just have ears that appreciate it. And for you grow up in the New York area, Syracuse is the big communications school. But I was like, I want to work in radio and TV, but I don't want to be that cold. So I went to Marist College in Poughkeepsie, because that's cold, but it's not as cold. You know what I mean?
I know that school. Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't quite as cold. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to Marist. It's closer to the city. I can intern and stuff like that. I definitely want to talk to you about your new album, and we've got plenty of time to do that. I just want to talk about this list of achievements for the Rascals. Obviously, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's so huge to be considered part of that. Also, Musicians Hall of Fame, Grammy Hall of Fame, Songwriters Hall of Fame, Vocal Group Hall of Fame, Hit Parader Hall of Fame, and Hammond Hall of Fame. And my apologies if there's another Hall of Fame that I missed, but look, I think that being a part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just must feel, to have that kind of acknowledgement. I mean, from the outside, there's those of us that scratch our heads a little bit about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The fact that the current class, the only real rock band is Rage Against the Machine, and I don't want to get you in trouble with anybody over there, Felix, but sometimes, you're just like, you feel like, this version of a band goes in, these members, those don't. It's like, even when they get it right, they don't get it wrong. But for you, that has to be great that you're a part of it, and how did you feel when you found that you had indeed been inducted, that you and the Rascals were going in and getting that kind of recognition?
Oh, it was really cool, to say the least. It was, just to explain, when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame started, It was not televised.
Right.
And basically, it was really a lot of fun because it was kind of like a reunion would be if you're going to your college or your high school or your fraternity or whatever. It was a lot of fun because it was informal. Then the powers that be decided to make it a television show. Now you got all the hazarai. Now you got all the problems. Now you got all the things. Well, we got to attract viewers. So we got to induct people that attract viewers. What does that have to do with rock and roll? Nothing. So it's kind of like the good old corporate curse, you know. So okay, it's still the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but you know the one that you mentioned that really means the most to me is the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Songwriters Hall of Fame, people don't even know exists because it has no physical site, has no TV exposure. It happens in a hotel in New York City in June of every year.
Right.
And the people who are in it, until recently, no one even knows who they are unless they happen to know people who write songs like Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, you know, Rodgers and Hammerstein, George Gershwin, you know, nobody special, just the best that ever lived, you know. So that's the difference. There's no publicity involved with the titles, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, no. I think that obviously, you need great musicians who can put those songs, on record and perform them live. But the importance of the songs being good enough for people to care and be connected with, it's like when, you have people who've sort of dabbled in music in their own way, people like Desmond Child and Holly Knight. But then when you look just the hundreds of songs they write for other people, and it's so impressive when honestly, I think Holly Knight also wrote songs. She would write songs for rock bands, but also like Tina Turner. And it's interesting when somebody can do that, when they write not just for themselves, I mean, Prince has, the body of work he has, and he basically gives away Manic Monday, because he's like, that's not really me. And then the Bangles have this great song, so it's so interesting to think about songwriters and the ability, but also to maybe recognize, this one's not for me, but so you getting to be a part of some of that, I think that I think makes sense because it's not for television, and you're not going to put songwriters who maybe, I'm not gonna call any musicians out, but there's some songs that are written better than others, let's say, and
yeah.
So
and McCartney wrote most of them, like,
right,
McCartney
exactly.
and Bob Dylan. I mean, there's nobody better than that. Elton John,
No, of course not.
But I mean, as I say, like all of these Hall of Fames, they also carry a little bit of karma with them. You know what I'm saying? But that particular one, that's cool.
So
really cool.
You still do stuff with the Rascals, and
right.
my understanding from the notes is anybody who wants to see what the Rascals are up to, the rascalstour.com is where they can find out that sort of stuff. But I do want to talk to you about the solo album, and I thought it was interesting that I guess this isn't your first solo album, Then and Now, but it's your first solo album in 30 years. So, 1993. So that is 30 years. I went to college, Felix, like I explained. So I was able to do that like that. I'm like, yep, 30 years. So talk about Then and Now. How, was there an aversion to doing a solo album for 28 of those years?
No,
how does it come about?
Well, basically, I did other albums during that period of time. I wish they hadn't put that into the publicity, tell you the truth, because it just confuses people. I did a Christmas album during that period. I did at least one live album during that period.
Oh, cool.
I didn't do a studio album, and one of the reasons you don't do a studio album is because what are you going to do with it? You're going to hang it on your wall. Paul Simon recently put out an album. And Paul Simon's a pretty good songwriter, by the way, not bad,
Yeah, he's written a few good ones, Felix. Yeah, a
Yes.
couple.
And he said after the release of it, he said, I don't know why I do this, because you can't get it played on the radio. People
Yeah,
really, for the most part, don't buy it. I'm sorry to say. Well, maybe I shouldn't do this. Now that would be a tremendous loss, because every song that he does is part of his heritage that I think really should not disappear. But there is there is an economic kind of factor to it. You put X amount of money into something and get absolutely no return sometimes. Most of the time. So you say, well, why am I doing this? Well, the only reason you really do it is because you have this desire to create, which is why I moved to Nashville. I moved to
right.
Nashville. I live in Nashville. This is Music City, and there's no question about it. The songwriters down here, uh, they hold a certain position of kind of like understanding or respect that doesn't really happen in a lot of other cities. They get what we do down here, you know, and there's so many of us. So a lot of people just fly in, and write, stay for a week, and then go back. But what happened with this particular album was COVID, the pandemic. You know,
Sure.
we got this idea. My manager and a few other people say, look, why don't we do? And it goes back to our last subject, songs. Let me do 5 songs that influenced you, re-record them, and then write 5 new songs that kind of show that influence, for want of a better word. So it would be now and then and now, et cetera, et cetera. So we started it, and then the pandemic hit. So now we can't work. I mean, everything was pretty much closed, but we do have our computers, and we do have our technology, and we do have our Pro Tools and our Logic and our, you know, uh, sounds. So we continue to do it. And by we, I mean the members of my band, my guitar player and co-producer, Mike Sievers. So we really kept sharp doing this. We had a ball doing this, and it came out quite good.
It's interesting that you say that because over the last few years in particular, I have definitely talked to a lot of musicians who had time to do an album that they weren't expecting. Sometimes it's with their main band, and in some cases, it's with their main band and a solo album and a new project, because people were, like you're talking about during the pandemic, people were going stir crazy. When people were lucky enough to have facilities in their homes, like so many musicians do, and just there's so much music that was recorded over that year and a half or so that still hasn't come out because it's like you can't put it all out at once. And I think what you were saying before that, there's so much truth in that, where there are a lot of bands that are still very popular. They tour, they do a lot of stuff, but you've had musicians, the two that immediately come to mind, both Aerosmith and Kiss, have said, why would we make new music? But then you have other bands like Cheap Trick who put out a new album every year, and we're like, yeah, I mean, it's just who we are. We have it in us. We want to let it out. We want to share it with people. And yeah, we're going to play, maybe 1 or 2 of those songs. People come out and see the hits. But I think that, and Cheap Trick puts out great albums. There's a lot of bands that still put out great music, but how do you hear it? Well, you're really you're a fan of the band, and you're on their mailing lists or social media, and it comes out. So these bands will have like, oh, look, we have the #1 album this week because it came out, and then the next week it's number 75 or whatever. And it's very unfortunate because obviously the old method of you work a record, you put out a bunch of singles, you stretch it out, the new single comes out, you get more sales. But radio stations, even satellite radio, they don't really want to play new music from classic artists. They'll do it when it comes out. They'll be like, oh, there's a new Deep Purple record. Here it is today. But then tomorrow they're right back to Smoke on the Water, and it's unfortunate that that the economics don't work. But I'm glad that you didn't let that get in the way. And then and now was still something you were invested enough and you wanted to share with people.
Yeah, very well put. I mean, you summed it all up. That's why, basically I'm on the Bladtcast, my man. That's where it's at. See, I mean, like
Thank
I
you.
say, yeah, that's where it's at. I mean, you got to get out there to the public, and maybe somebody will hear it and like it. One of the interesting things that happened here was, we finished it up, And then, we were getting ready to release it. And then again, my manager, he comes up a lot in my conversations. He said, no, 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 man, you got to do a vinyl. I said, what do you mean? You have to do a vinyl. What? Yeah, people are buying vinyls.
It's
Well,
true.
well, the problem is that up until very recently, the people who do the pressings for, the vinyl product are the same people that did it in 1960s and 70s. There's only a couple of plants in the U.S. and they're all booked up with Beyonce and Taylor Swift. You can't get in there for a year. So it took me
Uh,
over a year. Now people are starting to realize, well, okay, maybe we should start one of these plants, you know.
yeah.
And so that was the most interesting thing. So as I was looking into this so-called new uh, new phenomenon that's old, vinyl, I realized, okay, it sounds different, but I think really what it is people want to have something in their hands that they own.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Because as I referenced at the beginning of our conversation, I have two small children in my house, so the physics of vinyl doesn't
Yeah.
appeal to me because if there's jumping around in the house, I don't want my new record to get scratched. So I still tend to prefer to buy things on CD for the simple reason it can go from CD to right onto my iPhone, and and then I can listen to it. I tell a lot of musicians that I appreciate the care and the detail they put in. For me, does it sound good when I've got one earbud in while I'm doing the dishes at night, keeping an ear on the kids, making sure they need me? But what I really like is to if I've got a long drive, that's when I like to put
Sure.
in a new album and listen to it. And
Absolutely.
I appreciate when people put out albums. I love to look through the liner notes, and as a kid, it's like you knew who the guest musicians were on everything because you sat there and listened and you read the liner notes. And sometimes you'd even get the lyrics, and when a band put the lyrics in there, I'm like studying it. It was like doing my homework. It was they
Well, I
put more
mean,
time into it than actual homework.
as you know, I mean, like basically when people first started listening on, in your case, an iPhone or an Android phone, it didn't sound that great. But you
No.
know what? I mean, the earbuds that they have out now, and you know, it sounds pretty darn good now. I mean, let's face it, really sounds good. As a matter of fact, I'm sure that many people mix with that in mind, so that they know that this sounds good in your AirPods, or in your Bose or in your Sonys, because many people listen. They listen. Not we used to do it in car radios. I mean, we used to
Yeah.
have little car radios in the studio, car speakers, and you'd have these giant speakers. You got these little pieces of junk that you have in your in your car, and you had to make sure it sounded good on that, man, or you couldn't release it. So, you know, like I say, if you're a music lover, sounds like you're a music lover. You're
Yeah.
going to listen to music.
Right, exactly. And it doesn't even always happen, but if a band that I have been a fan of for decades puts out something new and maybe I don't love it, I'm still like I'm glad they're still out there trying, they're still putting stuff out. And when it does get some kind of traction, and I mean that's the crazy thing. It's like, oh yeah, we put out this new album and it's actually selling well because 8 seconds of this one song is being used on TikTok by a lot of people. You're like, all right, so whatever it takes in this day and age. But I'm so glad that you put out a full album. And as we wind down, I did want to talk because obviously our visual audience is able to see some of the beautiful packaging there with the
Right.
butterfly. So I wanted to give you a moment as we wind down the conversation to talk about sort of the significance of having the butterfly here.
Well, the symbolism of it is a very joyful kind of promise for the future, happy, peace. That kind of energy is always what I've kind of stood for, and this just really depicted it. It really came out and said, "Look at me. Isn't that nice and pretty and wonderful and soft and gentle? For about 10 seconds, can I have your attention?" 15. How about that? You know, and I think we need that in our life. You know, there's a lot of like tranquility in there. There's a lot of, really depth in there, you know, and I'm so glad that it happened like that, because the title really, really doesn't speak to that, but it does if you go really deep into it. So it all works out.
Well, Felix, it was wonderful to get a chance to chat with you. For people to get more information and to obviously be able to pick up Then and Now, either physically or obviously digitally, Felix Cavaliere, but I'm going to spell it FelixCavaliere, music.com. And
That's
then
right.
just on Twitter at your name. Felix, thank you so much for taking the time. It was wonderful to get to chat with you, and I look forward to whatever comes next. And we're into November. The fact that you mentioned that you put out a Christmas album within the last few years, I've got something new to look for.
Oh, good. Well, maybe we'll have them send it to you. And by the way, say hello to Felix and Lucy for me.
I absolutely will. I'll play this for them, and I'll be like, Felix. Felix says hi. Thanks again. And
All right,
our
man.
audio audience is going to hear a little bit of Soul Love right now, but our video audience, you can find it wherever you find music. Thanks again to Felix Cavaliere. Thanks again, man.
See you, my man. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.